Hey guys, we're Tech Admin here, and today we're going to be installing Windows NT in a virtual machine. Now we're going to be using Oracle's VirtualBox in order to do the installation. And as for our installation media, I created an ISO image from the actual physical disk that I unboxed in my previous video. And the reason I did that was just to save time. The virtual machine will install faster from an ISO file than it will from the actual physical disk. So without much further to say, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to do is create a virtual machine, and I'm going to name it Windows NT 4, and it went ahead and selected the proper type and version for us. We're going to give it 512 megs of RAM, which is more than enough for this OS. So let's hit create. I believe 2 gigs of storage space is all that Windows NT 4 supports. I may be wrong on that, but we're going to leave it at default. Alright, now that I've got the virtual machine created, I'm going to go ahead into settings, and we're going to make sure everything's good to go. Let's see. I will enable this. That's fine. That's all good. Now in this tab here in the storage, we're going to insert our ISO. So we're just going to hit this drop down here, and usually I'd have to pick this, but I've created this virtual machine once already, so VirtualBox knows where the ISO is, so I'm just going to select it. Audio should be fine. For network, I'm actually going to select bridged adapter, and that's because in a trial run I had some trouble getting the networking to work with it set to NAT. So we're going to leave it at that. Serial port, USB, share folders, all that should be good. So now we should be able to start the virtual machine, and it should boot straight into setup. And there we go, straight into setup. It's worth noting that later versions of Windows NT required you to press a key in order to boot from the CD, whereas this version doesn't require that at all. As long as the boot device is set to the CD-ROM and the CD-ROM is in the drive, it boots straight into setup. Alright, here we are at the first screen of setup. We're going to press enter to continue. This is saying that it's found our CD-ROM drive, which obviously it has, because otherwise how would we have booted from the CD in the first place. But we're going to hit enter to continue. We're going to continue on this screen. This is something I found a little annoying. You actually have to scroll all the way through the license agreement before it'll let you press F8 to continue. Later versions just let you press F8 without having to scroll down. We're going to go with the standard setup here, and we're going to create a partition, maximum size, and we're going to format it as NTFS because no one wants to use FAT. The default installation directory is fine, and continue. Just going to check the drive and then copy some files, and then it should reboot. Yep. So I'm actually going to eject the disk, otherwise I'll get stuck in a boot loop. So we'll go ahead and do that and let it boot back up. Alright, we are back from the reboot, and it is asking me to reinsert the CD-ROM, so I'm going to do that now. And now we should be able to continue with the setup. Next here, we're actually going to pick custom. Next, name. I'm going to name it, or I'm going to put my YouTube name in. Organization, home user. Oop. Having a bit of trouble typing here. CD key. Okay, I'm going to enter my CD key, and then I will be right back. Okay, I have entered the CD key, and now it's asking me to set a computer name. I'm just going to name it Windows NT-Virt for virtual. Actually, you know what? I'll just name it NT-Virtual. That makes a bit more sense. Password. For the password, I'm just going to use password. I'm not going to create the emergency repair disks. Okay, so here, this screen won't show up unless you pick custom. where I picked it a couple screens ago, and this is what I'm going to use to basically install everything that's available on the CD. And you can quite easily do that by simply unchecking each item and rechecking it, and it should check all of the sub items under that category. So that should be everything. So we got 3 out of 3 there, 9 out of 9, 4 out of 4, 3 out of 3, 13 out of 13, and accessibility options doesn't show anything. I could actually probably do without that, but that's fine anyway. We will continue. Alright, now we're going to set up the network here. So we're going to hit start search. It found our adapter. So we're going to hit next. TCP/IP is the only protocol we need. That's fine. Next. We're going to hit continue here. We do want to use DHCP, so I'm going to say yes here. And we're going to just hit next. Next. Down here at the bottom, you can actually see the network icon is flashing, so it is talking to the adapter. I'm just going to set this to use my current work group, the one that I use on my home network, and that is Faron Province. If you've ever played The Legend of Zelda, or at least some of the later Legend of Zelda games, that may look familiar to you. And here we go, we're going to hit finish. Alright, time zone. I am in the Eastern time zone, which is usually up a bit. There we go. Eastern time zone, US and Canada. Continue. So it found our display adapter. We can actually up the resolution a bit here, but we won't be able to set the color palette any higher until I actually install the VirtualBox Guest Editions. So we'll just go ahead and grab that higher resolution. This is something that I believe only Windows NT 4 required, maybe earlier versions. I'll have to go back and check. But when you change the resolution or anything in the video display properties, you actually have to hit this test button here, and then it's going to show a bitmap with all the different colors and resolution. I thought that was pretty interesting. You definitely don't see this on later versions of Windows. Yes, I did see it properly. So we're going to hit OK there. And now it should copy a few more files over and then ask to reboot. Okay, so we're going to actually eject the disk once again so I don't boot back up into setup, and we're going to restart. This menu here, I'm not sure why this shows up. This is just something that Windows NT does by default. I don't think later versions did this. I'm not sure about earlier versions, but I will be showing you how to disable this little OS loader screen here. Okay, here we are in Windows NT for the first time. I'm going to insert a Control-Alt-Delete, type in our super secret password, and we are here. Now this screen here that you're seeing, or this window rather, is actually the same one from Windows 95, or at least it looks exactly the same, barring the change in Windows version up there at the top. But I thought it was pretty interesting that it's pretty much the same screen that you see when you first boot up a installation of Windows 95. So we're going to close this, and as you can see, the color depth is set pretty low. So I'm going to install the guest editions, and that will fix that for us. So I'm going to insert that and then start the installation here. It's warning us here that we do not have Service Pack 6 for NT4 installed, and they recommend that before installing guest editions. I am going to get around to installing the newer service packs for Windows NT. That may be in a later video when I do some more experimenting with it, but for now we're just going to continue and skip that. Okay, with the VirtualBox Guest Editions installation done, it's asking us to reboot, so we'll go ahead and do that now. Okay, so we are back, and now that I have guest editions installed, I should be able to maximize this window, and the resolution should adjust to match that. Or I say that, and it doesn't work. I might have to log in first, actually. let me do that now. There we go, much better. Now that we've rebooted once, there's actually a checkbox here on this screen, so we can disable it from showing up at startup. So we're going to do that now. And also, now that we have guest editions, we can actually set true color here. So we'll go ahead and do that. Of course, it wants me to test it before it'll let me set it. So we'll go ahead and do that. Yes, I can see it. Apply. And okay. So now let me... There we go. That looks much better. Actually, I should be able to full screen this. Much better. Okay, so here we are with Windows NT 4 in its full glory, high color and all. So as I said earlier, you can actually disable that bootloader screen, and the way you do that is go into Properties here under the My Computer icon, go into the Startup and Shutdown tab, and then here where it says Show List 4, we're going to set this to 0. And you're going to want to make sure that you have Windows NT Workstation version 4.00 selected as the default startup item and not this one. If you select the other one, your display settings will be all wacky. I actually think that that VGA mode was more of a fail-safe in case you had some graphics issues. Okay, with that set, we'll go ahead and take a quick look around Windows NT, and then in the next video I will be doing some other things. I'll talk about that in the video. But here we have the start menu, and it's pretty basic. We have our control panel here, and there's not a whole lot of interesting things in the control panel. One thing that I do want to note is that the command prompt actually still shows the MS-DOS icon. I thought that was pretty interesting. Under services here, we can see all of the current running services for Windows NT, and as you'll notice, there are not very many services that are running by default. Compare that to current versions of Windows where you have a huge daunting list of services. This list is actually pretty short. Back in the start menu here, we actually have administrative tools installed by default. This was something that with later versions of Windows, I think starting in XP, you had to install as a separate item. But in this list we have Performance Monitor, and if we load that up, you'll see that it looks very similar, or at least somewhat similar, to the current Performance Monitor. I don't know if it's the same program, because I believe around Windows XP Performance Monitor was removed. Don't quote me on that, I don't know for sure, but I don't remember Performance Monitor being in Windows XP, and then I remember it making a comeback in Vista. But if we hit the plus here, we can actually add a counter, and go ahead and close this, and as you can see, it looks very similar to the current Performance Monitor, or at least somewhat, and it works in a very similar way, which is pretty neat. Speaking of that, if we open the Task Manager, we can see that it is the Task Manager that appeared in later versions of Windows up to Windows 7, and it looks pretty much exactly the same. So if you've ever used Windows 95, you'll know that the Task Manager was very gimped and looked nothing like this, but the proper full Windows NT Task Manager did appear in Windows NT 4. Back in the start menu, and here we can see the command prompt with the MS-DOS icon again, and if we launch that, it is the full version of command prompt they're used to from newer versions of Windows NT. And we can actually check if our network's working now by pinging a website. I'm going to try Google, and yes, our network is working, or at least our network access is working. Under accessories, we have your pretty much standard items. You have Paint, which is the Windows 95, or at least it's the same as the Windows 95 version of Paint with the new interface compared to Paintbrush from the Windows 3.1.1 days, or Windows 3.1 rather. We also have the Clock app still kicking around. If you remember from Windows versions 1 through 3, this was a pretty popular program, and it's still here in Windows NT 4. Under games, we have Pinball. Not many people know that this pinball game was actually included with a lot of earlier versions of Windows. It came in the Plus packages for both Windows 95 and 98, and it was included by default with Windows NT, although you had to make sure you selected it at installation. Now that I have the controls set to something more reasonable, let's play a little bit. Unfortunately, my sound isn't working. I haven't really troubleshot that a whole lot yet, but Other than that, this game right here makes me very nostalgic for Windows XP. I played a lot of it during Windows XP's days. And I'm still just as terrible at it, apparently. Back in our administrative tools, we have the Disk Administrator, which bears a striking resemblance to the disk management from later versions of Windows. I'm not sure if disk management is based off of Disk Administrator, but they do look very similar, especially these this list of disks with the long bars going across. As comparison, this is disk management in Windows 10, and as you can see, we have these same bars with the disks listed on the side, so they are very similar in look. Back in our administrative tools, we have the Event Viewer, and you'll see after launching it that opening log files is very fast. Compared to later versions of Windows, this is astonishing because for some reason, I think it may have started with Windows Vista, Event Viewer became very slow to load log files. I don't know what's up with that, but it seems like every version of Windows since Vista, you try to open up the Event Viewer and open a log, and it just seems to take forever for some reason. If we right click on the desktop and go to Properties and then go to the Plus tab, we can actually access a few extra settings that are included, such as showing the Windows contents while dragging and showing the icons using all possible colors. This is an interesting setting. I'm going to go ahead and set that, and it requires a reboot, so I'll be right back to show you the result. Okay, after a quick reboot, you can see how that setting affects the icons. To me, they just look a bit strange, like they're slightly off. I guess I'm just too used to the regular Windows 95 style icons that these just look, I don't know, fake or something like that. It's just really strange. Anyway, that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. In the next video, we're going to look at installing some software and maybe trying to get properly connected to the web. Right now, all we have is Internet Explorer 2.0, which is included by default, so maybe we'll try to find a better browser and play around with that sort of thing. Oh, and also try to get the service packs installed. So anyway, until next time, guys, take it easy.